All right, today we are taking on a true giant of history, the British Empire. It's this incredible story of achievement, but at the same time, it's a story of profound exploitation. So let's get right into it. How on earth was this thing actually built?
I mean, just let that sink in for a moment. At its absolute peak, this was the largest empire in all of human history. We're talking about a level of scale and power that's almost hard to wrap your head around. It really saw the best and, well, the very worst of humanity, often happening at the exact same time. And yeah, that brings us to the real mystery, the big question we're trying to answer here. How did this pretty small, famously rainy island in the North Atlantic manage to project its power across the entire planet, and in doing so, completely reshape the world we live in today? To figure that out, we actually have to start not on the world stage, but right there on the island itself. Because before England could even dream of building a global empire, it first had to get its own house in order and become a single, unified kingdom. And this was not a quick process. It took centuries. It really kicks off with figures like Alfred the Great, who you can see here, pushing back the Viking invaders way back in 878. Then, just a few decades later, his grandson Aethelstan manages to unite all these little Anglo-Saxon kingdoms into one thing, England. But here's the really interesting part. Notice how quickly that unity turns into conquest. Within just a couple of hundred years, English kings are already pushing outwards, asserting control over their closest neighbors, Ireland and then Wales. So that foundation for empire, it was forged right there at home. So, with the British Isles more or less under its thumb, England's ambition starts to shift from land to the sea. And this incredible change from a local power to a global maritime force was really sparked by, of all things, a king's messy personal life and a really fierce international rivalry. Yep, it pretty much all started with Henry VIII. He was absolutely desperate for a male heir, which led him to try and divorce his first wife. Well, the Pope said no. So Henry just went ahead and broke away from the entire Catholic Church, created a new Church of England, and made himself the head of it. And that one single act put England on a collision course with the biggest, most powerful Catholic empire in the world, Spain. And this rivalry basically defined the whole era. It was a clash of titans. On one side, you've got Catholic Spain, laser-focused on pulling massive amounts of gold out of its colonies in the Americas. And on the other, you have this new, upstart Protestant nation, England, now under Henry's daughter, Queen Elizabeth I. And their goal? Totally different. It was all about disrupting Spain, plundering its treasure, and making a name for Protestantism on the world stage. Now, Elizabeth's secret weapon in this whole affair was this group of incredibly bold sailors we call the Sea Dogs. Now, these guys weren't just your average pirates. They were privateers, which means they had an official license from the Queen herself to go out and attack and loot Spanish treasure ships. Men like Sir Francis Drake became absolute legends in England, and, of course, total nightmares for Spain. They were making the English crown rich while simultaneously wrecking their rivals' economy. Of course, Spain wasn't just going to sit back and take this. In 1588, a furious king of Spain sent his invincible armada to just conquer England once and for all. But the English, with their smaller, nimbler ships and some really clever tactics, like setting their own ships on fire and sending them into the Spanish fleet, they pulled off a legendary victory. And this wasn't just about survival. This was England announcing to the entire world that a new power had arrived on the seas. Okay, so with Spain's naval power checked, England could finally get serious about starting its own colonies in the New World. But here's where the story takes a really dark turn. These new societies, often founded on some very high-minded ideals, would be built on a system of just unimaginable brutality. I mean, just take the Puritans who settled in New England. They sailed across the ocean with this incredibly powerful vision. Their leader, John Winthrop, famously said they were going to build a city upon a hill, a shining beacon of religious purity and moral order that the whole world could look up to. A pretty noble ambition, right? Well, that shining city was built on a foundation of this. And this is a direct quote from the South Carolina slave codes. It just lays bare the dehumanizing thinking that was required to make the whole colonial economy work. This wasn't just random cruelty. It was a legal system designed to declare millions of people as less than human, completely unqualified for even the most basic rights. And the scale of it all, it's just staggering. Look at this number. In one single decade, British ships moved 200,000 enslaved Africans, mostly to power the hugely profitable sugar plantations. And make no mistake, the transatlantic slave trade wasn't some kind of side business. The enormous wealth it generated paid for the Royal Navy, it built English cities, and it financed the industries that would turn Britain into a global superpower.
So Britain has its colonial model, its economy is booming thanks to trade and slave labor. Now it's poised to go from being just a major power to the global superpower. And that leap was really made through a combination of commercial genius and raw military power. A perfect example of this is what happened in India. It didn't begin with a British army invading. It began with a private company, the East India Company. And they had this simple but incredibly effective playbook. First, set up some trading posts. Step 2, get involved in local politics, make some allies. Step 3, kick out your European competition. But the final step, that was the real game changer, getting the right to collect taxes. That's the moment a company stops being a company and starts acting like a government. And then came the 7 Years' War, which you could argue was the first real world war. The result for Britain was absolutely stunning. Just look at this chart. Before the war, France controlled this massive chunk of North America. By 1763, it's basically all gone. It's handed over to Britain, which overnight becomes the undisputed master of the continent. And just to put the cherry on top of this truly global cake, in 1770, Captain James Cook charts the coast of this huge, unknown southern continent. He claims it for Britain, calls it New South Wales, and just like that, the empire has a foothold on every single inhabited continent on Earth. But here's the great irony in all this. The empire's absolute moment of triumph, that victory in the 7 Years' War, well, it contained the seeds of its first great disaster. The whole imperial project was about to show its first major crack. See, wars are incredibly expensive, and that 7 Years' War left Britain with a mountain of debt. So, to pay for it, the government in London figured, hey, the American colonies should help foot the bill. So they started imposing new taxes, like the Stamp Act, on colonists who had gotten pretty used to running their own affairs, and who, more importantly, saw themselves as British citizens with British rights. And for the colonists, this really wasn't just about the money. Their rallying cry, no taxation without representation, was about a core principle. They argued that a parliament thousands of miles away, where they had no voice, had no right to tax them. And what started as protests over taxes snowballed into a full-blown war for independence. And then, with some help from Britain's old rival, France, the unthinkable happened. A British army surrendered, and the empire lost its richest, most populous colonies. And what's so wild is that this quote was written in 1773, just a couple of years before the American Revolution really exploded. It perfectly captures the supreme confidence of the empire at its absolute peak, this idea of a limitless power, an empire where the sun would literally never set. They had absolutely no idea what was just around the corner. So it all comes back to this incredible and incredibly complicated picture. The British Empire was a product of conquest, of commerce, and of deep contradiction. It connected the world like never before, but it did so by subjugating millions. It brought unimaginable wealth to Britain, but at what cost to so many others? It's a legacy that, really, the world is still trying to figure out today.